Ignore if my voice sounds a little different this episode. I'm sick, but I'm just gonna pretend I'm not. What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're gonna be reviewing the, what is this? The 6th episode of Kong-A-Thon. This will be for King Kong Lives, released in 1986. This is another De Laurentiis film. Dino De Laurentiis returns as executive producer here. The dude who directed King Kong 1976 returns as the director for this movie, and that's about the extent of all the people that return from one film to the other. I wonder why. Maybe they read the script. I just want to start out this video by giving a special thanks to De Laurentiis for making me draw monkey tits. I never had that opportunity before up until I was making the thumbnail for this, and so I just really want to thank everybody involved with this film for just giving me the opportunity to draw monkey tits like I've never had before. I never thought I would get to do it, and I never knew I wanted to do it until after I did it, and then I realized, no, I definitely didn't want to do it. Today we will be looking at what is not only generally considered to be, but is definitively and objectively the worst King Kong movie ever made. That being said, I don't actually really hate this movie. I know I've been quite hard on it in the intro here, but I don't hate it the way that 99% of the people who have watched this movie hate it. So we'll, I guess, talk about it, right? Let's break down the movie. Let's go through the plot and talk about what works, what doesn't, I guess. We start off with what used to feel like an extended recap of the World Trade scenes from 1976, but watching it this most recent time for Kong-A-Thon, it really flies past at a brisk pace. It's been years since I've seen this movie. Since 2017 was the last time I watched this film. It's been quite a while, and even then, before that, it has been a while before I had watched it again before that, because this is not a movie that I loved. When I very first got it on DVD, I watched it quite a few times. I did enjoy it quite a bit, and then I took lots of breaks from it as I got older. Not necessarily because I started to dislike it, but just because I was getting into other things, and so I didn't really revisit this movie a lot. And then I heard a lot of the things people would say about it. I read some reviews, heard what people had to say, and it was like, wow, everybody hates this movie. It was implanted in my brain. It was unlike a situation where I watch a movie and I really like it, and then I listen to a review where someone bags on it, and I go, well, no, that's not right. You know, the person's saying, oh, the movie's horrible for this reason, and I can sit there and I can dispute that and say, well, no, it works for me because this, and this. This was a movie where it was like, I was hearing all the critiques of the movie and agreeing with them, so I was like, oh God, I don't want to revisit this movie because I have a good memory of it. I remember liking it as a kid, so if I revisit it now, I'm going to realize how bad it is. I watched it in 2017, and I kind of remember not liking it, but I'm not totally sure on that. Then you cut till now, in 2019, when I rewatched it for a Kong-A-Thon, and it doesn't disappoint me as much as I thought it would. It's got issues, quite a bit of them, but it's not as horrible as I expected it to be, and maybe that's the reason I'm so pleasantly surprised with this viewing of the film, and I have good things to say about it, is just because my expectations were non-existent and they were so low that the movie couldn't have disappointed me. But I don't know, I don't have as much horrible things to say about it as I thought. Anyways, as a kid, I remember this World Trade Center sequence taking forever, and I always hated it because it was edited differently than it was in the original. And I remember as a kid that used to always bother me whenever a movie would do a recap or a flashback to another movie, and I'd notice that it was done differently, because in my head I'd be like, well, no, that's not how that happened. Kong doesn't climb the tower and then get shot by helicopters immediately. Soldiers come up to try and fight him and he has to jump between towers. Like, I know how it's supposed to go, so the fact that the movie's presenting it differently used to really throw me off. I can't imagine what young Derek would have done watching the Evil Dead movies, because those movies have crazy different recaps from film to film. Either way, pretty epic soundtrack plays here and makes things feel very grand as Kong is shot off the Trade Center towers. We get a whole bunch of reused footage from the 76 movie. It's the only appearance of Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange's character in this film, and then Kong falls off the Trade Center, hits the ground, splats, his heart stops beating, and he dies. Like I said, John Scott, who does the soundtrack in this movie, he does a really good job. One thing I will say about the King Kong movies is this is definitively the worst King Kong movie, and it's got a pretty killer soundtrack. All of the Kong movies, not a single one of them doesn't have a good soundtrack. King Kong vs. Godzilla is the worst Kong soundtrack in my opinion, and that's not even necessarily true. It's just that King Kong's portion of that soundtrack is the weakest Kong music, because that soundtrack overall is pretty awesome. Got a lot of great military marches, and Godzilla's music's awesome. Either way, King Kong Lives has a pretty cool soundtrack. I really like it. I really like King Kong's theme in this movie. One thing I don't like is how King Kong gurgles his way through this movie. He does not have his weird, really stylized roar that he had in the 76 movie. It became a stock roar, I'm gonna assume, recently, within the past 20 years or so, because this movie came out 10 years after the original King Kong 76, and they're already using a different roar, and it just sounds horrible. The roars in this movie are real bad and generic. I hate them. I wish they had done some more stylized roars, like the Toho roars, or even the 33 roar. Don't use these weird gurgles that just sound like a guy going, "Rah!" It just sounds bad. So we cut to 10 years later, which puts us in present day for when the movie was filmed, so it cuts to 1986, where we find out that Kong has somehow kind of been alive. We're in a lab, and we meet Amy, who's our character played by Linda Hamilton from the Terminator franchise. She shows up, she's like this doctor who's in charge of Kong, and it turns out that Kong's been revived. They somehow got his heart back to beating, and he's on life support, but he is currently dying because his blood is degenerating over time, because he's not moving. He's been stable in the same position for 10 years. He's been in this coma, so his blood is just kind of not being produced the way it should be anymore. He's dying because of that. So they're like, he needs new blood, but his heart is fine, which won't make sense in 10 minutes when we find out that he needs a new heart. But they say his heart's fine, the thing's beating like a clock. Why would you go out of your way to say that if 10 minutes later we're gonna find out he needs a new heart? I don't know. Kong needs an operation, he's dying, and his blood is the problem. They're like, only a miracle will save him now. So introduce Hank, which is our Indiana Jones kind of stand-in this movie. He strolls on in, he's our lead character. He stumbles his way into, I don't know how to say this word, Borneo? I have no idea what on earth country that is, but he stumbles his way on into the island area, and he discovers the 40 to 50 foot tall Lady Kong. Okay, first of all, why? How on earth does he discover Lady Kong? Where are they? Where is he? He's not on Skull Island from the last movie. This is a totally different island. How has no one noticed Lady Kong there? How did she get there? The natives kind of seem aware of her because they have a plan in place to deal with her. How did no one else ever know she was on this place? Is it like, what, an uncharted island, or where is it? We never get a sense of what is going on in this sequence to tell us why Lady Kong is here, how no one else has found her. If she's the only one, we're led to believe she is the only Kong that they find. Maybe they should have just checked Skull Island, because if there's another Kong just randomly wandering around Asia, I'm sure that there is at least one more Kong running around on Skull Island. Either way, they find the 40 to 50 foot tall Lady Kong, such a stupid name as well. They'll name her in a little bit in the movie. They name her Lady Kong in the movie, clearly because they were like, well, King Kong was taken in 1970s when they did a King Kong cash-in. When, what was that, like the UK, somewhere in the UK, they did a King Kong cash-in, like a British version of King Kong called Queen Kong, and it's like a parody, it's horrible, and so they were like, well, we can't have her be called Queen Kong because that is obviously going to be a problem, and so we don't want to have confusion with that, so we'll call her Lady Kong. Just give her a new name. Just, I don't care what you call her, just give her a new name. I don't know. Does she need to be called Kong? Kong is kind of Kong's name, you know? He's called Kong. I guess you could argue the species is called Kong. There's no indication of that. He's King Kong, sure, he's the king of Kongs, I guess, if that's the way you're going to argue it. I've always just seen Kong as his name, and he's King Kong because he's just the best of his species, and then only in the MonsterVerse has it ever really been a case where Kong is the species name. I don't know. It's just like, I think Lady Kong's really silly. Lady Kong strolls in, she's knocked out by sleeping darts. These natives are like way prepared to deal with her, and so that's that. Lady Kong's actually played by a dude who you would never know that unless you looked on IMDb. Good for him. He pulls off a very convincing female, and I gotta say, they make the ape look very feminine. Good for them for doing that. I guess it's the monkey tits help out in that regard at least. She is shorter than the freshly 60-foot King Kong. He grew about 10 feet from the last movie, so he's now 60 feet in this film. You don't really get a sense of that scale though. Hank Mitchells, which is our main character, he sells Lady Kong to Amy in her university, even though Amy's like, I don't want to bring Queen Kong here to the States because she's a female and that's gonna get King Kong all riled up when they're too close. Mitchell's like, yeah, whatever. So he sells Lady Kong, and they're like, we're gonna go through with the blood drive. Mitchell comforts Lady Kong on the plane as she's transported to America from wherever the hell he found her. I don't know. I stand corrected though. I did say that 76 will be the last time we find out how they transport Kong. I guess my point still stands. This isn't King Kong being transported, it's Lady Kong. but we see her transported by airplane in this movie. You know, there's an inversion of the Dwan Kong dynamic from the last movie, which is the Anne Kong dynamic from the 30s movie. It's the general King Kong trope. They flip it on its head here with a Lady Kong having a crush on a dude. There is no King Kong having a crush on any female characters that are human in this movie. So the plan is to draw blood from Lady Kong to fuel King Kong. Well, that's good to go. The special effects here are okay. I think the suits looked pretty good most of the time, and neither monster necessarily looks bad ever in the film, but the effects aren't as impressive as they were in the 1976 movie. The practical stuff isn't nearly as fleshed out. There's no really extravagant sets, no good destruction scenes where you really get a sense of how big these monsters are and see New York City around them. A lot of the blue screen work is pretty good in this movie. There's a couple weird composition shots with Kongs themselves being put in front of different backgrounds, so that's a little awkward. The miniature forests that they run around in look fine, and like I said, the suits both look okay. Nothing's wrong with the suits. The animatronic hands look kind of generic. You know, you can't tell if it's supposed to be Lady Kong's hand or King Kong's hand. I would assume they just reused King Kong's hand from 76. Maybe they built a new one, but the fur doesn't really match between Lady Kong's fur and the fur on the arm, which is really what the big difference is that the fur on the arms is like totally different than the fur on either monster. Kong has a totally new design in this movie that we'll get to. He looks okay. Like I said, the suits are okay. The actors playing the monsters do a good job playing them for what the script tells them to do. I don't really like the way they treat Kong in this movie, but we'll get to that. Overall, it's just not as impressive. They don't do anything nearly as ambitious as they did in the 1976 movie. There's no giant practical walls for Kong to destroy, no giant sets for him to destroy. There's a barn that Lady Kong falls in that looks pretty cool at the end, and then there's a couple military battles that look pretty good. But overall, it's like nothing really ambitious is done in this movie, so it doesn't really stand out. It's also like this is a point when Godzilla movies are about to become very ambitious with Godzilla vs. Biollante in 1989. So King Kong, you're slipping here, because 76, you really think about that in context. You go, King Kong 1976 came out 1 year after Terror of Mechagodzilla, and the special effects just look incredible. I think they look a lot better than Terror of Mechagodzilla, if I'm being 100% honest. It's like two totally different decades that the movies were made in, but they were only made a year apart. Whereas you get here and you're like, yeah, this movie could have been made in the 1970s. There's no real special effects jump that this movie makes, which is what Kong always does. He's always had legendary special effects. This movie doesn't really make a big leap with Kong, doesn't do anything ambitious, doesn't push the envelope at all, so it doesn't really stand out for that, and especially when you think in a couple years Godzilla is about to do that with Godzilla vs. Biollante, where they had incredible sets and everything else going on. So it's like it's coming off of the heels of a special effects marvel, and it's just not living up to that. Alright, so back to the film. There's this odd medical drama stuff that continues for quite a while as they do surgery on Kong. It's open heart surgery. They chainsaw him open. They give him this mechanical heart. Why the hell they need to give him a mechanical heart? I'm not sure. They told us earlier that his heart was working fine. It's a long, bloody process. The operation's a success. It feels very gratuitous. There's no real need for all the gore, no real need to drag it all out that long anyways. It's just a long, boring sequence. Lady Kong wakes up. She's put in an infirmary. It's like a temporary holding facility for her. Everyone celebrates. They're like, hey, everything's good. King Kong then wakes up for the first time in 10 years. He smells Lady Kong. She smells him. And they're like, oh, I want to get to my mate or whatever. Kong has a bit of a new design, like I said. It looks okay. He's much more ape-like here. He's got a lot longer of fur. I really like the face of this King Kong. That's the only thing that I like about the new design. The face is pretty cool. I like the really long fur. Other than that, he looks like a generic gorilla in this movie, which he did not in the previous film. He looked like King Kong. He looked like a monster, like he was something of his own in the last movie. In this film, he looks very generic, like just a dude in a gorilla suit. A very well-made gorilla suit, granted. It's not Rick Baker or his special effects team. It's a very good gorilla suit, I'll give them that, but it's still just a generic gorilla suit. Nothing about it really stands out. He walks around on all fours for some reason. He doesn't act like King Kong acts in this movie. I just don't get it. It's like this isn't the same monster that fell off the World Trade Center. He really did die there. What came back is like a hollow shell of what he used to be. It's like the Pet Cemetery resurrected King Kong and brought back some like nitwit version of him. I don't know. He jumps up trying to catch his mate. He's like trying to break out, essentially, and he gets shocked by electrodes and knocked out. Amy goes back to report what happened, and a relationship starts between her and Mitchell. Good to go. Yeah, we got all that going on. Lady Kong is prepped for transport. They're like, we need to get her far enough away from King Kong to where he doesn't smell her. She freaks out, and so Kong wakes up again. He breaks out of his chains. Easiest time he's ever had breaking out of chains here. He's just got handcuffs and some cuffs on his legs, so he just kind of kicks him out and then walks away. He breaks out of containment. It's a kind of fun scene where a security guard notices him breaking out. It's kind of funny. Lady Kong is then netted and prepped for transport. King Kong breaks into her facility. It's, special effects here are actually pretty cool. There's a lot of good practical stuff. There's really weird, super thin Lady Kong giant practical legs that they use here that look super silly and gross. But other than that, everything else looks fine. Kong and Lady Kong fall in love. Kong helps Lady Kong escape. And then Mitchell sabotages all military attempts to stop Kong. He crashes cars. Just makes sure that Kong can get out of there alive. Kong then picks up his love and carries her off into the mountains. The monsters are monitored by the military for quite a while. They're tracking them for a while. Kong's trying to avoid all human contact. They're like, we don't want to do that again. The military wants to kill the apes, kind of. The military does, but the US government doesn't, which will become kind of important in a little bit. Amy and Mitchell head off towards the apes. The Kongs are messing around in the mountains in the ridge here. There's some really silly gags with a snake and Kong's hurt leg. He's playing up his wound to try and get some love and affection from his mate. Really stupid stuff. King Kong's acting like a goofball in this movie. It's what are you? What happened to the giant fierce monster from the 76 movie who would not be acting like a silly goon just to try and get some attention? I don't know. I just really don't like the way they overhumanize Kong in this movie. Not even to the point where it feels right. It's like they took all the good qualities of Kong and got rid of them and overhumanized him in a bad way, because the next movie will humanize Kong a lot, and yet he still feels very powerful, very much like a monster in the next movie. They humanize him in the right way. This movie does it in the wrong way. Again, why does Kong walk on all fours in this movie? Why does he eat meat in this movie when it was explicitly stated in the last film that he only eats vegetables? Why does he have this gross gurgly roar? Why does he have black fur? Why is this not the King Kong from the last movie? This Kong is, like I said, literally nothing like the last one, other than he's a big ape. Amy and Mitchell go deeper into the woods. They cross a bridge and there's some tension as Amy almost falls off. Oh no. Amy has this cardiac monitor device to help her monitor Kong's robo heart. I guess you could say this is a mechanic Kong because he's powered by mechanics. Amy tends to Mitchell's wound in a way that parallels Kong and his girlfriend. It's all good there. Their relationship continues to develop and grow and eat up screen time that it doesn't need to waste. This movie feels a lot longer than it is as well, I'll just say. This movie's only an hour and 40 minutes and it feels like a 3-hour film. The Kongs have a nice little bed together. They make a nice little bed out of trees. Amy and Mitchell catch up to the Kongs and set up camp. There's more silly stuff with Kong that really humanizes him. Amy and Mitchell then bang. They don't show it. The next morning, Mitchell wakes up and notices that King Kong is gone. Lady Kong is all alone. Oh no. Amy quickly flashes the camera, which I had a friend in elementary school who really liked that. King Kong then picks up a tree or something. I'm not totally sure what he's doing. What is he doing? He's picking trees. Yeah, what is he doing? He's picking trees or something. The military shows up to attack him. They drop all these chemicals on him that are meant to knock out the monsters. Lady Kong is knocked out. It works on her. She's knocked out and netted really quickly, and she's carried away. King Kong, though, for whatever reason, it doesn't work on him. They attack him, and it just doesn't knock him out. They do want to capture him up until he throws a rock, and it crushes a truck. No one actually gets hurt by the rock. It just crushes a truck, and then they're like, well, time to kill Kong. So they try and kill him, and they force him off a cliff, supposedly to his death. He falls into a river below and starts to drown, and then smacks his head on a rock and bleeds more than Godzilla after he fought Mechagodzilla. It's like, holy cow. Kong disappears into the river and is supposedly dead, like I said. Lady Kong wakes up. She's put in prison, I guess. I don't know why. I feel like realistically here they would have transported her back to Skull Island or something, but nope, she just wakes up in a prison for some odd reason. It's even illegal in the movie. I don't know how they get away with it for so long. 9 months later too, there's a really weird time skip that they never expressly state how long it's been, but it has to be 9 months as we find out. Lady Kong, she's being illegally detained. Yeah, that's a real plot of this movie, is that the US government wants Lady Kong set free, but she's illegally detained by the military, and the government just goes, I guess. Kong shows up in the swamp and is eating reptiles and whatnot when he should be eating trees, because again, it was expressly stated in the last movie that he doesn't eat meat. The Kongs somehow commune over long distances like they're mutos or something, not totally sure how that works. Mitch which then buys this huge patch of land somewhere. It's supposed to be the area he starts the movie in, I think, with all the natives that he treats. He makes them like treat him like he's God earlier. He's supposed to have this redemptive arc, but he buys this plot of land and is like, yeah, this is going to be a big sanctuary for the Kongs or whatever. It's all going to be good there. Kong strolls into this small town in one of the only fun sequences in this movie, and there's a whole bunch of chaos ensues. A bunch of hunters get together and go after him. They trap Kong after exploding rocks around him, Godzilla Monster Planet style. It's pretty cool. Kong breaks free, crushing them after he's tortured. They do torture him. They trap him and torture him, and they plan to kill him. He breaks free, crushes two of them, snaps one of them in half, holy cow, and then he eats the other one. His heart then starts to malfunction or something. It hurts him, and he breaks the cardiac device on accident. And then they're like, well, I guess Kong only has 1 day left before he's gonna die now. This will become a big problem later. Amy notices that Kong has killed some of those hunters who were torturing him earlier, and so now she's like, oh yeah, now he's sure to die. It's like, are you sure? Because I definitely watched him destroy a helicopter, kill 3 different soldiers on top of the World Trade Center, not to mention all the innocent people that he trampled on in New York City in the last film, destroyed a subway just looking for Dwan. Are you sure that these 4 hunters who tortured him are really going to be that big of a deal, especially when they were illegally hunting Kong? Why on earth would we care less about the poor innocent people that King Kong trampled on in the last film and more about these hunters? What is she talking about? This must be Kong's gonna die now. It's like, oh no, he was already gonna die anyways. You just told me his heart's gonna fail. The heart failing takes all tension away from this ending because we know from the start that King Kong is destined to die. So everything that happens from this point on, there's no tension in it because no matter what Kong does, he is going to die. You should not have had the cardiac arrest go on right here where he's gonna die of heart failure, because it takes literally all the tension away from this third act of this movie. Now we don't care. We already know Kong's gonna die, so it doesn't matter. Him fighting the military at the end doesn't matter how that outcome winds up. If the military kills him, then so be it. He was gonna die in 3 hours anyways. The US government orders the capture of Kong and Lady Kong. They're like, we really don't want them dead. Colonel Bad Guy is like, yeah, whatever, we're gonna kill them regardless. Of course. King Kong strolls through the suburbs, some fun scenes there, some silly stuff. This movie's kind of like a comedy. I don't know. It's really weird in tone. It doesn't know if it wants to be serious or comical, so it kind of picks both and walks both routes, and it just kind of falls apart because of it. Amy and Mitchell break Lady Kong out of prison, although it takes another 30 minutes for her to actually get out. King Kong ambushes a military barricade and throws rocks on him. It's another cool little sequence. I really like that part. We learn that Lady Kong's pregnant. King Kong shows up and helps free her. I'm skipping quite quickly through the plot here because the movie drags on endlessly. Lady Kong kidnaps Mitch and takes him away. Not sure why that was needed. It does nothing for the plot. Amy goes after them and she catches up to them, so it's like she could have just driven after them with Mitch. I don't know why he had to be kidnapped. Kong's crashed this barn party of all these hillbillies. It's like all set in the South, and everyone's a Southern stereotype in this movie. Like I said, they crash this barn party. Lady Kong literally crashes it by falling into the barn and destroying half the barn. This is where she's getting ready to give birth. She goes into labor. The army then shows up. They all squad up and they show up with tanks and full artillery. They're like, we're gonna kill King Kong because Colonel Bad Guy says so. They really lay into Kong in this scene, and Kong goes on a rampage. This is one of the coolest King Kong sequences in a long time. It's really, really cool. I love this ending here with King Kong just going berserk on the military. It's so awesome to see King Kong get a victory on the military. He goes crazy, destroys everything. He's getting shot up, exploded. The tanks are shooting him. He's just blowing up. You're seeing like huge chunks of him fly off. He's bleeding horribly. It's really brutal how much he goes through here, but he is not stopping. It's not like the 76 movie where the helicopters shoot him and he can't react because he's so hurt. In this one, he's getting shot, but he's fueled by pure hatred, and he's just destroying everything, picking up tanks, smashing them on the ground, taking rocks, crushing everybody. Really cool. He smashes General McBad Guy into a grave. It's another silly little scene here. And then Kong's heart fails and he dies. It's like I said, it takes all tension out of this. Doesn't matter that King Kong gets a victory on the military. Doesn't even matter that the military's blowing him up with tanks. We already know how this ends because they told us that King Kong's destined to die of heart failure. So all of this that happens here, it's moot. The military was never going to kill Lady Kong. They wanted to detain her. So nothing changed. She would have gotten freed anyways. Literally the only thing that changed is that King Kong kills some military guys before dying. I really think that heart failure thing was a horrible idea. Now that the bad guy's dead, the military's like, yeah, we're not actually here to kill Kong. We were just following his orders. King Kong Jr., who's named Kid Kong, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, is born. So we're just gonna call him Jr. He's like a human-sized ape, but he feels tiny. He should be so much bigger. He should be like Son of Kong size, 15 feet, 10 feet maybe. Why on earth is he like 4 to 5 feet tall? That really does not make any sense. Babies are not that proportionally small, are they? There's no way. She's like 40 to 50 feet tall. Why is the baby 4 feet tall? That's so small. It feels ridiculously tiny. There's no way, because a human can't hold their baby in their palm like she can hold little Kong in her palm. That doesn't, he's so tiny. He's like going through all this pain and labor. It's like you could just pop that thing right out. It's like a Tic Tac size to her. The baby meets his father. Little Kong reaches out to King Kong and they touch hands. It's a touching little moment here at the end where little Kong holds Kong's fingers as King Kong officially dies. Lady Kong is like, yeah, he was clearly gonna die. She accepts it pretty quick, but Junior has no clue what's going on. He's quite sad about it. We then cut to sometime later, not sure how long, but little Kong and Lady Kong have been moved to the reserve Mitch bought, and little Kong is free to swing from tree to tree, and he is happy to grow up into the next King Kong, and that's that. I'm gonna be honest, the problem that I have with this movie is just that the human characters are, well, they're actually not horrible. I think Mitch and Amy aren't terrible. They're just not special. There's nothing really special about them, but they're serviceable. The problem is that the script is really bad, and it's just bad writing. There's nothing clever about it, and it really creates a lot of problems for itself, like I've outlined in this review. So the human story in this movie is bad. The monster story in this movie, there's no monster fighting in this film, but there's King Kong and Lady Kong doing their thing. It's quite silly. This is a lot of the comedic elements of the movie, is everything with King Kong and Lady Kong. It's really silly. King Kong does get some really cool sequences in this movie, like I said. The scene where he's running through the small town trying to get out of there without destroying anything because he clearly doesn't want to cause damage in this film. That's all good, and I really do like seeing King Kong fight the military at the end and get a victory on them. That is awesome. Other than that, though, everything else with the monsters is just kind of silly. I don't want to say it's bad, but it's silly. It certainly isn't as good as anything else we've seen prior in the franchise. Other than that, the soundtrack's really good. I do really like the soundtrack in this movie. It's not as good as John Barry's score for King Kong 76. Probably one of the weaker King Kong soundtracks, but it's still good. It's got some really cool themes in it, and the special effects are good. They're not bad. There's only a couple times where you see like the really ultra thin Lady Kong giant practical legs and it looks silly. Other than that, they reuse a lot of the techniques from the 76 film, but they don't push the envelope like all the other Kong movies up to this point have. So it's okay. There's nothing really disappointing about the special effects in this movie. There's nothing sad about them. It's not like they're bad, but they also aren't as grand as any of the previous King Kong movies have been. No, it's not like they're really this marvel of technology or where you watch them and go, wow, how did they do that? You go, oh, I know exactly how they did that. It's just a suit. I don't know. It's not as good as the previous films. Overall, King Kong Lives it's like a 5 out of 10. It's a mixed bag. There's some really cool stuff with Kong in it, but overall, the majority of the movie, you're not going to be having that good of a time. Unless you watch it with people or you watch it like I do, because I can enjoy this movie on its own. I watched it solo for this review. I didn't have anyone else watching it with me. I still had a decent time watching it. It does drag on in a lot of parts, but I didn't hate the movie. I don't hate watching it like I thought I would, but I wouldn't recommend this to your average monster fan or just cinema fan in general. Unless you're like looking for kind of a good bad movie to watch with friends, this is definitely a good bad movie. It's like a 5 out of 10 if I'm being 100% honest here, and that's King Kong Lives from 1986. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time. D-Man out.